Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about faith and doubt.
Oh yeah, big topic.
It is a big one, but we're going to try to break it down and make it relatable. And we're going to be focusing on this one sermon by Pastor Steven Furtick.
Okay.
And he uses a story that a lot of people probably know. It's the one where Jesus walks on water.
Right.
But he uses it in a way that I thought was really insightful. So yeah, we're going to kind of jump into that and see what we can learn from it.
Sounds good.
So Furtick starts by setting the scene, It's the middle of the night. There's this huge storm raging.
Yeah.
And the disciples are in a boat. They've been rowing for hours. They're exhausted. They're probably terrified.
I mean, yeah, I can't even imagine being in a boat in a storm in the middle of the night.
Right, exactly.
Mhm.
And then suddenly they see this figure walking towards them on the water.
Oh, wow.
And it's Jesus. Now imagine seeing that, your teacher walking on water in the middle of a storm.
Yeah, that would be pretty mind-blowing.
Right. I mean, I think I would question my sanity at that point. But Peter, Peter's always the bold one. He shouts out to Jesus, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water." And Jesus just says one word, "Come."
Wow.
And so Peter actually steps out of the boat and starts walking on the water.
He does.
He's defying all logic, all human understanding, just driven by his faith in Jesus. But then something shifts.
What happened?
He takes his eyes off of Jesus and he starts focusing on the wind and the waves. And Furtick points out this really interesting detail. The wind didn't actually get stronger at that moment.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was Peter's focus that changed.
In this video,
And that's when
there's
he
this
started to
woman,
sink.
right? And she shares
It's almost
this,
like he allowed the
really
storm to
personal
become
and
bigger
kind of
in his
heavy
mind
story
than the one who had
about
the power to calm
abuse
it.
that
Exactly.
she experienced.
And I think that's something we
from,
can all
get
relate
this,
to,
a
right?
church
Oh, for
leader.
sure.
How often do
Wow.
we let our
Yeah, it's
problems, our
intense.
worries, our
And she
anxieties
goes on to talk about how
overshadow the bigger
that whole
truth of
experience
God's presence and power
really
in our lives?
messed with her
All the time.
when it came
Yeah,
to supporting
it's like we get so
certain
fixated on the
political
waves
leaders,
that we
like
forget we're
how would
actually
she support
standing on
someone
water.
who
That's a great
maybe
analogy. I like
didn't
that.
act in a way
And
that lined
Furtick
up with her
uses this
faith.
other analogy
really
of
tough
a small
question. I mean,
object
it
blocking
gets
a
to the
much
heart
larger
of
one.
how
Okay.
we judge
He's talking
our
about
leaders,
how a
especially
tiny
when we're
worry,
trying to
a
reconcile
minor
that with our
setback,
beliefs.
can
Exactly.
completely
And
eclipse
you can
the
tell
much
she's not just
vaster
talking about her own
reality of God's
experience, right?
power
It's
and
like
presence in our
she's
lives.
using her
It puts
story
things
to
into
kind of
perspective.
Right, so it's not
start
that the
this
problem
bigger
itself is
conversation
necessarily
about
huge.
how Christians
It's that we
in general
allow it
should
to
approach
fill our
leadership,
entire field of
especially when a
vision.
leader's actions,
And so the
maybe
question
don't seem
becomes,
so Christian.
how do
Yeah,
we
it's
shift
almost
our
like she's
focus?
saying, look, just because
How do we
someone
keep our
talks
eyes
the
on
talk
Jesus
doesn't mean
even
they
when
walk
the
the
storms
walk.
of
For
life
sure.
are raging
And
around us?
she even calls out Donald
That
Trump
is
by
the
name
question,
in this
isn't it?
video.
It is, and that's what we're going to keep
specifically
digging
talking
into.
about
All right,
his
I'm
treatment
ready.
of women.
So stay
and
tuned
how,
for part
to
2 of this
her,
deep
that
dive where
doesn't
we'll
line up
explore
with
some
what
more
she
Furtick's
believes about
insights
God.
and see
That's
what
interesting
practical
because
steps
it
we
brings
can
up
take to
this whole
strengthen our faith
idea
and
of
navigate those
questioning
storms with
authority,
confidence.
even
I can't
within a
wait.
religious context.
Welcome back.
Right.
Like, are we
So
supposed to just
before we
blindly
really get into
follow
this
anyone who
miracle
says
math
they're Christian?
concept,
Well,
Okay.
I think
there's
it's worth
this concept
remembering
in the Bible
that
of
even
false
in those,
prophets, right?
you know,
People who
big,
claim to
epic
speak
Bible
for God, but
stories,
actually might
things
be
didn't
leading
always go
people
smoothly
astray.
right away.
It's a reminder
Yeah, it's not
that
like
we
the
have
Red
to be
Sea
discerning.
parted the second
So
Moses
it's
raised
not
his
about
staff.
blindly
There
following
was probably a
anyone.
moment of like,
No, not at all.
And to be fair, the
God
video
is
doesn't
this
tell you
thing on.
exactly who
Totally.
to vote for.
Like, I'm
either. It's
trusting
more
you,
about
but where's
like
the
prompting
evidence?
you to
And
think
Furtick
about
actually
your own
points that out.
values.
Okay, so
Even
like, do your own
Jesus'
research,
disciples had
figure out
those
where you
moments.
stand,
Right,
all that.
right.
They were
Like,
with him day
what are
in
your
and day
core
out,
values as a Christian?
witnessing miracles
How do
firsthand.
those values shape
But
your
when they
political
found themselves
choices?
caught in
It's
that
about this
storm,
idea of voting
know,
your conscience.
they were still
which basically
filled with
means
fear
making a
and
decision
doubt.
that aligns
So it's
with
not
your
about
deepest
never
sense
feeling
of
doubt.
right and wrong.
It's about what
even
we
if it's a
do with
hard
that doubt.
decision
Right.
to make.
It's about
And
how
I
we
guess that
respond
can
to
be
it.
a real
Like,
struggle.
how do we keep trusting God
especially
when
in
we
today's
don't see
political
the immediate
climate.
Definitely.
results? When
Because,
the storm
let's be real,
feels like it's going to
you're rarely
going to
find a
And one thing
candidate
Furtick
who checks all the
emphasizes is the
boxes,
importance of
who
shifting our
perfectly
perspective,
reflects everything you believe
of
in.
remembering that
So
God
you're
doesn't
often left
operate on
trying to
our
weigh
limited
different
human
factors,
timescale.
like
Okay.
their
He
policies
uses
versus
this phrase
their personal
divine
behavior.
delay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's tough.
To
Like,
illustrate this
what if you
idea
agree
that
with a
sometimes
candidate
what we
on,
perceive as a
say,
no from God
economic policy
is actually just a
but you
not
totally
yet.
disagree
So
with
it's
how
like
they
that
act in
saying,
their
God's
personal life.
timing, not mine.
And that's
Exactly.
exactly
And
the
that
kind
can
of
be
thing
really hard
this
to
deep
grasp.
dive
Yeah.
leaves us grappling
Especially
with.
when we're in the middle of a
How do you
difficult situation
reconcile
and we
those
want
internal
relief now.
conflicts?
But
You know,
Furtick
is it a
reminds
matter
us
of compromise?
that God is always working
of
behind
choosing
the
what
scenes,
you see as
even when we
the
can't see it.
lesser of
Okay,
two
so that's where
evils?
faith comes
These are
in.
questions
Yes.
that we each
Trusting
have to
that
wrestle
even though
with
we don't understand
on
what's
our own.
happening,
Right.
God
I think
has
that's a really
plan,
important point.
and
So,
he's working it out.
you
in
know,
his
for
own
everyone
You got it.
listening, don't
And
just
it's not
take our
always
word
easy.
for it. Don't even just
You
take the video's word
It requires
for
a conscious
Go out there
choice
and
to
read,
fix our eyes on
research,
God,
talk to
on
people,
His promises,
especially
on His
those who might
character,
have different views
instead
than
of
you.
getting caught up
It's
in the
about forming
swirling
your own
chaos of our
informed
circumstances.
opinions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's almost
And,
like we
you know,
have to
maybe
train
through
our
those
minds to
conversations
see
we
the
can start
bigger
to find some
picture
common ground to
Even when
remember
we
that God
disagree.
is bigger
Well
than our
said.
problems.
And
Absolutely.
with that,
Bigger than
I think
our
we'll wrap up this
timelines,
deep
bigger than
dive.
our
Remember,
doubts.
this is
And
just a
sometimes
starting
that
point.
means
keep
reminding
thinking,
ourselves
keep learning,
of all
and
the
most
times God has
importantly,
come
keep
through
the
for us in the
conversation
past.
going.
Right. Couldn't
Of
agree
all
more.
the prayers
Thanks
he's
for having
answered,
me.
all the
Thanks for joining
miracles
us.
he's
We'll see you
performed
next
in our
time.
lives.
I guess that's like building up our faith muscles, right? The more we exercise our faith, the stronger it becomes.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is the more we practice trusting God,
Yeah.
the more we start to see his fingerprints everywhere. We start to recognize those divine delays as opportunities for growth, for transformation, for deeper intimacy with him.
Okay. So we're talking about shifting our perspective, remembering God's timing,
Yes.
exercising our faith muscles. But what about this miracle math concept?
Right.
How does that fit into all of this?
Well, remember, miracle math is all about understanding that God doesn't work within the confines of our limited human logic. He can take something small, something seemingly insignificant, and multiply it to achieve extraordinary results.
Okay, give us some examples. I love a good Bible story.
Okay, how about the story of Gideon?
Okay.
He was this guy who was chosen to lead an army against the Midianites.
Okay.
And the Midianites were like vastly outnumbering his troops. God actually tells him he has too many soldiers,
What?
that they'll think they won the battle in their own strength. So God whittles down the army from thousands to just 300.
Oh, wow.
And guess what? They still won a resounding victory.
It's like God was saying, let me show you what I can do with a little bit of faith and a whole lot of my power.
Exactly. And then there's the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000 with just 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish.
Oh, yeah.
It's another classic example of miracle math in action. It just doesn't make sense from a human perspective.
Right.
But God took what was available and multiplied it beyond measure.
Okay, these stories are great, but I think it would be helpful to connect them to our everyday lives. I mean, most of us aren't facing enemy armies or trying to feed thousands of people.
Right.
What does miracle math look like in our, normal day-to-day struggles?
You're right. It's all about application. So let's say you're facing a financial crisis.
Okay.
You're looking at your bank account, and it just doesn't seem like there's enough to cover your bills.
Yeah, I've been there.
That's when you have to choose to activate miracle math.
So instead of panicking and focusing on what I lack, I shift my focus to what God can do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You start by acknowledging your need, but then you choose to trust that God is bigger than your bank account. You start looking for those creative solutions, those unexpected opportunities, those divine appointments that God might be orchestrating behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a new job opportunity, a financial windfall, or simply the wisdom to manage your resources more effectively.
It's like instead of saying, God, I need more money, you're saying, God, show me how to use what I have wisely and trust you to provide for my needs.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just about finances. It applies to any area of our lives where we feel stuck, limited, or overwhelmed. Maybe the health challenge, or relationship problem, or career setback, whatever the storm may be. The principle is the same. Shift your focus from the problem to the problem solver, from your limitations to God's limitless possibilities.
So how do we actually do that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to talk about it,
Yeah.
but how do we actually shift our thinking from scarcity to abundance, from fear to faith?
That's where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
And it's something we'll explore in part 3. We'll delve into the practical steps we can take to activate miracle math in our own lives.
Okay, so we're back, and we're talking about this whole idea of miracle math.
Yes.
And I think for me, the biggest question is like, how do we actually apply this in our everyday lives?
Right.
It's one thing to hear about Gideon and the 300 or Jesus feeding the 5,000, but how do we bridge the gap between those epic Bible stories and our own struggles with, finances, relationships, or just feeling overwhelmed by life?
Well, I think one of the most important things to remember is that faith is not passive.
Okay.
It's not just about believing that God can do something. It's about actively partnering with him.
Okay.
It's about taking those steps of obedience, even when we don't see the full picture yet.
So it's not about sitting back and waiting for a miracle to fall from the sky.
Right.
It's about being willing to get our hands dirty, to step out in faith and do what we can, even if it seems small or insignificant.
Exactly. And that's where miracle math really comes into play. Because often the things God asks us to do don't make sense from a human perspective.
Right.
He might ask us to give when we feel like we have nothing to give, to forgive when we're still hurting, or to step out into the unknown when we're terrified of what we might find.
It's like he's saying, trust me, I'll multiply your efforts. I'll take your small act of obedience and turn it into something extraordinary.
That's a great way to put it. And remember, it's not about our ability. It's about his power working through us.
Okay, that makes me think about the story of the widow's mite.
Yes.
She gave just a tiny amount, but Jesus said she gave more than all the rich people because she gave all she had.
Exactly. It's about the heart behind the gift.
Yeah. And that's so encouraging because it means that even when we feel like we have very little to offer, God can still use it in a powerful way.
Absolutely. It's like those little seeds that grow into giant trees. We might not see the growth immediately,
Right.
but with time and God's grace, those small acts of faith can blossom into something incredible.
Okay, but what about those times when we feel like we're doing everything we can, but nothing seems to be changing?
How do we deal with that frustration, that sense of, God, where are you in this mess?
Those are the times when we need to lean into prayer
Mm-hmm.
and remind ourselves of God's character. We need to remember that He is good, that He is faithful, that He loves us unconditionally, and that He has a plan for our lives even when we can't see it.
And I think it's important to remember that sometimes the miracle might not look the way we expect.
Right.
It might not be a sudden dramatic shift in our circumstances.
Yeah.
It might be a gradual unfolding, a subtle shift in our perspective, or an unexpected surge of peace and strength in the midst of the storm.
That's a great point.
Mm.
We need to be open to the different ways God works.
Mm-hmm.
And remember that He's often more concerned with transforming our hearts than He is with changing our circumstances.
So it's not always about the external outcome. It's about the internal transformation.
Exactly.
This has been such an insightful conversation. I feel like I have a much deeper understanding of what it means to navigate life's storms with unwavering faith.
Me too.
And I really hope that our listeners are walking away with, a renewed sense of hope
Yes.
and a deeper trust in God's ability to work miracles in their own lives.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's remember Furtick's powerful statement. God did not answer Elisha's prayer by eliminating the enemy. Instead, He illuminated His presence.
That's good.
The challenges might not disappear, but our perception of them can change.
This is the essence of miracle math, shifting our focus from the problem to the problem solver, from our limitations to God's limitless possibilities.
It's about choosing to see our circumstances through the lens of faith,
Yes.
knowing that God is always at work even when we can't see it.
So good.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've been inspired to activate miracle math in your own life and experience the transformative power of God's grace. Until next time, keep seeking, keep exploring, keep believing.